commander, and its pronounced material inferiority in men, equipment and supplies. But these were compounded by a complete lack of reliable intelligence. No one knew when or where the British offensive would open. Senior Axis commanders could do little but attend to their own sectors and hope that the blow, when it came, could be contained. On the British side, intelligence appreciations gave an accurate picture of their enemy's strength and general deployment, but only a rough indication of the depth of the Axis defences. If these survived the initial assault, the offensive would have to be reinforced or even remounted with fresh troops in a different sector. In its final deployment, 8th Army consisted of 3 corps. The strongest of these, the 30th Corps, was commanded by Lieutenant General Oliver Lees. 30 Corps consisted of 5 infantry divisions and 1 armoured brigade group. The composition of 30 Corps, which included divisions from Australia, New Zealand, India and South Africa, reflected the commitment of the British Empire and Commonwealth to the battle. The southern sector of the line would be held by 13th Corps. This was commanded by Lieutenant General Brian Horrocks. 13 Corps consisted of 3 divisions, of which 2 were infantry and 1 armoured. 13 Corps would mount diversionary attacks in support of 30 Corps' main offensive in the north. 10th Corps comprised the reserve and consisted of 2 armoured divisions under the command of Lieutenant General Herbert Lumsden. 10 Corps' task was to exploit the breaches torn in the enemy's front by 8th Army's infantry. Air support would be provided by the Desert Air Force, commanded by Air Chief Marshal Sir Arthur Tedder. Tedder's squadrons would be required both to protect and support 8th Army in its efforts. Facing these forces, the Panzer Army was commanded, in Rommel's absence, by General George Stummer and consisted of 3 Italian and 1 German corps. The Italian 21st Corps was stationed in the northern sector and was commanded by General Ennio Navarini. 21st Corps consisted of 2 infantry divisions, both of which were deployed in depth behind extensive minefields and fortifications. The Italian 10th Corps, deployed in the south, also consisted of 2 infantry divisions. 10th Corps was commanded by General Eduardo Neber, who expected the main British attack to be launched in his sector of the front. The Italian 20th Corps, commanded by General Giuseppe de Stefanis, contained some of the best formations in the Italian army. 20th Corps consisted of 4 divisions, of which 3 were held in tactical reserve. The 2 armoured divisions close to the front, the motorised division further back. The Folgore Parachute Division was deployed on the extreme southern flank. The Panzer Army's main striking force, however, was the German Afrika Corps, consisting of 2 panzer divisions, 1 mechanised division and 1 infantry division. The Afrika Corps was commanded by General Wilhelm Ritter von Thoma. Von Thoma's infantry, along with detached elements of 15th Panzer and 1 brigade of paratroops, were defensively deployed, while the mobile components provided a tactical reserve. Air support for the Panzer Army would be provided by the 2nd Air Fleet based in Italy. and commanded by Field Marshal Albert Kesselring. Kesselring's air fleet, however, had responsibility for the entire Mediterranean, and most of his resources would be devoted to keeping open the Panzer Army's lines of communication. When the Eighth Army completed its final deployments on the eve of Alamein, it had already won the Battle of Supplies. It possessed a 2-to-1 material superiority in men, and in tanks, guns and aircraft the difference was even more pronounced. To a large extent, the unsung heroes of the conflict in North Africa were the officers and men of the Royal Navy, and the soldiers, civilians and airmen on Malta. By their efforts in the central Mediterranean, they had rendered the Panzer Army virtually immobile, and ensured that the coming British offensive would have the best possible chance of success. At precisely 9:40 p.m. on October the 23rd, 8th Army's artillery announced the beginning of the Battle of El Alamein. For 15 minutes, nearly 1,000 guns pounded the Axis rear areas. Then, after a slight pause for relaying, they began laying down a curtain of fire on the forward defences. As the barrage rolled gradually through the minefields, the infantry attack went in. The main attack was launched on a narrow frontage by 4 divisions: the 9th Australian, the 51st Highland, the 2nd New Zealand, and the 1st South African. Facing them, the Italian Trentino Division and the German 164th Division held strong defensive positions in the complex of fortifications and minefields that lay to the north and east of the Materia Ridge. These forces were supported by the Italian Armoured Division, Littorio, and by 15th Panzer. Advancing behind the barrage, the British infantry and sappers quickly made good ground, cutting paths through the barbed wire and picking their way tentatively through the minefield. The first objective was a line drawn on the field maps halfway through the Axis defences and known as the Red Line. This was reached at around midnight in most sectors, and then there was a short pause while the front was consolidated, companies regrouped, and second wave battalions came up to take over the lead. While this was being carried out, the artillery barrage fell on the Axis positions to the west and southwest, rolling forward from the Red Line to the night's final objective, the Oxalic Line. This ran along the far side of the Materia Ridge and then swung north towards the coast. In the remaining hours of darkness, the infantry advanced towards these objectives, while the sappers cleared 2 corridors through the minefields behind them. As the night progressed, however, and the German-Italian defenders recovered from their shock, the attack began to lose momentum, and daybreak found the British holding positions in most sectors slightly short of the Oxalic Line. On the 24th, the British made several attempts to pass their armour through the minefield corridors to the Oxalic Line, but all were frustrated, either by uncleared mines or by highly accurate German anti-tank fire. This was a serious setback, indicating that the German defences were much deeper than the British had anticipated. The same fate